Hey, Pods Above replacement fans, Happy New Year. It's Rafi. I just wanted to jump in before the episode started to acknowledge that John and I discussed a potential trade for Jose Trevino to the Padres in this episode. Unfortunately, in between the time we recorded this and when we are releasing it, the Yankees went ahead and traded him to a different team, to the Cincinnati Reds. Jose Trevino was traded in exchange for Fernando Cruz and Alex Jackson. Basically 24 hours after we recorded this, I went on vacation after that and didn't have the chance to get around to it until now. But I just want to jump in and say that before we begin. Happy New Year. Thanks again for listening and enjoy the final installment of The Bubble Boys.
Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's all out of option years, so he's here to stay. It's John Precoda!
You got to keep me forever or get rid of me now, Rafi. It's time to commit.
Yeah, as we all know, everyone who ever runs out of options just stays in the major leagues forever. They certainly do not go to the baseball team upstate.
It's never like my dog. It's never a good thing when you're even talking about options. There's no like, how many option years does Tatis have left? You know, that's not like a
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we would sign Corbin Burns, but he's had an option year, so. How do we know we can trust him?
Spoiler alert, we checked how many option years everybody on our list had.
Yeah, exactly. Great sign for the conversation that we're about to have, which, of course, John, is the conclusion of our mini-series that has tentatively been titled The Bubble Boys. And we are going to close out with our Bubble Boy hitters, the guys who are... our fourth outfielders, our 26th men on the roster, essentially. So any things that you noticed when you were doing the research for this episode that stuck out to you just generally about looking at like Bubble Boy hitters versus Bubble Boy pitchers?
Yeah, it's a little bit easier to go in like excruciating detail on pitchers as compared to hitters just because there's so many stats, so much that you can dive into for pitching. So there's a little bit less for hitting, still a lot, but if you're the kind of person that's a little bit more story-based and a little bit less, I want every number for every single thing, it's the episode for you, my friend.
Yeah. And we have lots of stories to get through. In this episode. So why don't we just dive right in? And our first Bubble Boy is someone who I am shocked to say is not only still on their rookie minimum deal and hasn't reached arbitration yet, but also still has one more option year left on his deal. And that is Luis Campusano. The will he, won't he? It's the great, everyone always talks about Ross and Rachel, Sam and Diane. It's will he use the samurai stance or no? And that is the great question for Luis Campusano in 2025. John, it really felt like it was really the tale of two catchers, is it not?
Dude, looking over, the actual data for Campusano, it just made me infuriated. Just infuriated. Like, what the hell? Why? Why would you? Why? It makes no why? I don't get it at all. Like, okay, so you're a guy who just established himself in the major leagues, right? You're ready to get that big major league paycheck. You're ready to be a starting catcher on your baseball team. Wow, what an exciting offseason this is. You know what I'll do? I'll rebuild the whole thing that provides me with value. Not the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Like what provides me with value as a baseball player? It's not his defense. It's like his, that he's a catcher is valuable, but his catching defense isn't good. It's his bat. His bat was the carrying thing. That's the whole carrying quality. That's the whole reason he's a major leaguer. And what does he decide to do in the most monumental offseason of his entire career? He decides to start from scratch an entirely new batting stance. And the reason why the numbers themselves made me so angry was because when I like broke things down in 2023, when he actually like had some data, that he was accumulating, it was like, okay, so he had at least 39 plate appearances in July, August, and September. So that ended up being, let's see, 174 total plate appearances. Not a huge sample size, but also not nothing, right? And in July, he had a WRC plus of 112. Wonderful. You take that from any catcher all the time. August, he had a WRC plus of 162. Wow. So far, you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing, Campy. In September and October, 147 WRC plus. He ended up the year with 133 WRC plus. His WOBA was 364. His ex-WOBA indicated that that was a valid number because that was 353. Amazing year at the plate at the major league level, and he decides to rebuild his entire value in one offseason. What are you doing? Why? I don't understand.
Yeah, bit of a head scratcher, John. I'm looking at this data, and the thing about Campy that I find really intriguing is that when he came up in 2021 and 2022 for his brief appearances, 2021 he had 38 plate appearances, 2022 he had 50 plate appearances. The big knock that you could get against him was that he was a guy who either struck out a lot or struck out a fair amount and didn't really walk that much.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so interesting between 23 and 24 when he implemented this new stance is that his strikeout rate plummeted. Like once he really started to get significant sample sizes in Major League Baseball, his strikeout rate in 2023 was 12.1%, fairly low, and 13.7% in 2024, also fairly low. And look, he's not a huge walk guy. 4% in 2023, 6.7% in 2024. But really, when you look at a guy who goes from literally a 133 WRC plus in 2023 to an 83 WRC plus, like a 50-point drop in his weighted runs created plus, the first thing I immediately start looking at is, okay, like what it changed in his peripherals. Like, did he start striking out a lot more? Did he start walking a lot more or a lot less? And it's like, no, not really. No, like what happened was he just stopped being able to hit the ball hard.
Yep.
Just out of nowhere. I mean, not out of nowhere because we know that he fiddled with his stance, but just even going on quality of contact, he had a 353 expected WOBA in 2023, and that plummeted all the way to 290 in 2024. And so expected WOBA, this is not ex-WOBA con or ex-WOBACon, as some people like to say, where we're taking out, the non-contact walk, strikeout, stuff like that. Like, no. This is like this is ex-WOBA, but his peripherals, as we just mentioned, were basically the same. So it really is mostly just he stopped being able to hit the ball as well as he could in 2023. Like I just and this is what John was alluding to in the kind of initial part of this episode when talking about with a pitcher we can be like, oh man, like if he just threw that changeup which has a great shape a little bit more and like that's the tail of the tape and we can kind of like go with that. Like really for Campy it's just he could hit the ball hard and then he kind of couldn't,
Profar stole it from him. I think that's probably what happened. It wouldn't be such a big deal, catching. I feel like there's a lot of variability within the position of catcher, just because people are commonly injured. They're commonly at least playing a little bit tired or a little bit injured if not 100% healthy at least. And that wouldn't be a big deal if he could catch it all. But that's not his carrying quality. His whole thing was that he was a catcher who could hit, have a 133 WRC plus, have a 847 OPS, and have a 319 batting average. He crushed left-handed pitching to the tune of 202 WRC plus in 2023, which meant that not only was he a catcher, 3 days a week or however you want to use him, but also he could be a DH against left-handed pitching on those days that he's not catching. And so that's a bat, right? That's two things basically. It's a bench bat and also a catcher on the days that he's catching. and his catching defense isn't going to carry him, and it has to be the bat. And he had a great success, and then he switched stances, and just like when Profar switched his stance, suddenly his exit velos were through the roof. Now you get Louis Campusano switching batting stances, and suddenly his hard hit numbers are through the floor. And so please just don't do that, and ever again. Go back to the thing that you worked on for your whole life and get back to being that guy. And hopefully he can be. I don't know like what prompted his change in stance, whether that was, something physical or not. But if he can get back to the guy that he was, then he's a valuable guy. He's maybe even a guy that prompts you to carry 3 catchers because he is basically a bench bat on the days that he's not catching. And if he's the guy that was hitting last year with no catching defense, then he's not a major league player. He's not even somebody that I would want on my team. So what is it? You said that he has one more option year? He better damn figure it out this year. Otherwise, I mean, I'm not going to carry around a guy that can't hit and can't catch, when he's out of options.
Yeah, and the whole one option year of it all is quite interesting calculus for the Padres because there's a bit of a I don't know what to call it, like gamesmanship that the Padres. I don't know if gamesmanship's the right thing. They're gonna roll the dice a little bit with Campy. Let me just say that, I guess, which is that they have a choice before them, which is he's got one option year left, and that is much more valuable. That makes Campy much more valuable than if he had no option years left in terms of him as a trade piece, because there's a chance that some team out there sees Luis Campusano and is like, I know how to fix him. And if I can just have the ability to work with him for one half of a season in the minor leagues, he's going to turn into that prospect that he was exactly expected to be. And the question that the Padres have is, do they think that they can be the people to fix him? Because if they do, then you have to hang on to Campusano, and he has to become a major part of this organization because, as we've seen so far this offseason, the Padres ain't spending a lot of money. And Luis Campusano is cheap.
Dirt cheap.
And so, Luis Campusano being a serviceable catcher is a massive boon for this organization. Because, there's lots of people who are like, you should trade Campusano. Which I'm like, okay. Now you need 2 catchers. It's like we've now made the problem worse. And it's so unless you're trading for another catcher, in which case you have to ask yourself, why would you want a team with a trade with a team who's trading you back another catcher who they clearly think is worse than what they think Campusano will be with them? Yeah. So then you're going to have to find another way to get another catcher in. So that's either spending money or making a trade. And again, the Padres not exactly flush with pieces to trade these days. And you're hoping that whoever you come in is basically going to be a stopgap for Ethan Salas to come up. Please, dear God, not this year, but next year. And so I don't really see a situation in which Luis Campusano isn't on the Padres opening day roster. Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, you're also trading him off of a year in which he put up negative 0.5 WAR. I will say the projections for him going forward are much better than that. They have him at a 1.4 WAR player and think that he'll grade out to a 109 WRC plus, which is, kind of in between those 2 WRC pluses that he's put up in his career so far and probably baked into his minor league numbers, which were, always successful. So we're trading him off of his worst year with projections that are, pretty good, but if I'm the other team, then I'm going to say, yeah, okay, you can say that that's the WAR that he's going to put up, but I haven't seen it. He's never put that up in his career. In his whole career, he's put up 0.3 WAR combined. So, I don't know why I would value him at 1.4 WAR and expect him to have this, 109 WRC plus with 14 home runs in weird 420 plate appearances. Interesting. 420 is the number that they picked.
Coincidence? I think not.
But I mean, you could see the value, so I could squint and want to trade for him. I could see that, but I wouldn't be trading for him at his value. I'd probably be trying to buy him on a low value deal. But if you think about it, he's, I forget who ended up coining the term. I think it was Letters to AJ that coined Higgy as a 3 and D. where he's playing good defense and hitting homers once in a while. Campusano is actually kind of almost the exact inverse of that, wherein he's actually a higher average guy because he strikes out so little that a lot of balls are put in play. A lot of balls are put in play hard because he hits the ball pretty hard. And he's a high average guy. Like they even project him at a 261 average going forward. He had the 319 average in 2023. So if anything, he's like a not that great defender who is going to put the ball in play a lot, kind of like last year's team. That's probably, he probably fit into the thought process of not looking for a walk, but rather trying to make hard contact early in the count, like the team did last year. And, that guy towards the end of your order as your catcher is valuable. That guy who's hitting 260, with 14 bombs or whatever, at the end of your lineup, yeah, sign me up. And while his defense is, overall bad in basically every single category that it can be bad, it's not so excruciatingly bad that it makes him, he's not like Ryan Domit where you literally can't put him at catcher. So, I mean, if you have him with your 2 or 3 pitchers that you think that he gets along with well, and then can use his bat against left-handed pitchers off the bench or as a DH, then suddenly he's super valuable, and that's, probably more valuable than the 1.4 WAR that is projected. So there's something there. It's just, what the hell? Like, what the hell? And there's been so many questions about this guy for so long that it does make you think a little bit like, what is going on? Why is this not working like at a, somewhat linear pace, but rather so bumpy of a road? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on any of that. All I know for sure is that he has a lot of variance in his profile, and hopefully it ends up good. I do think that it'll probably end up as a well, hopefully this guy excites us for a while before he scares us, and he's hitting his best towards the end of the year, and we're excited about him going into the next year.
Yeah, I was just you mentioned that he is projected to put up 1.4 F4 next year, and that immediately got me thinking, did Austin Nola put up 1.4 F4 in his career with the Padres? And it turns out, no, he did not. He put up 0.9 total, and actually, if he hadn't played in 2023 at all, he would have put up 1.8. But 2023 was just so dang bad for him, unfortunately. Poor guy.
That was so bad. That was like one of the worst parts of any lineup that we've ever had, because we had a lineup full of people that would walk, and then it would always land like everybody was clearly pitching around people in order to get to Nola, and then he would tank it. Oh man, that was a frustrating year by a player.
Huge bummer. But yeah, I mean, my guess about catcher is that we haven't even said. John, do you want to talk briefly about Brett Sullivan?
Yeah, I put my first note was mostly who cares. So he has this small sample size, obviously, but he's never been a good hitter. He's never billed as somebody who was going to be a good hitter. He's now 30 years old. He's pretty mediocre on defense, better than Campy. His carrying quality is blocking pitches, which, okay, whatever. I guess you can send him out there against somebody who's wild, maybe once a week. But he's also out of minor league options, so we have to carry him at all times. Oh, my point was, hopefully we get another catcher, because him being basically like a glorified Rule 5 draft pick where he's just like taking up space on your roster and you're afraid to cut him because you don't want to lose value sounds terrible. So, hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I mean, there were a lot of people that were like, hey, look, Brett Sullivan, he's hitting down in El Paso. Okay? He's slugging 485. He's got a 104 WRC plus as a catcher in El Paso. That's amazing. And I say, okay, yeah, sure. But you know who had a 145 and a 146 WRC plus in El Paso as a catcher? Austin fucking Hedges. All right. So I'm sorry. And maybe that's not fair to Brett Sullivan, but truly Austin Hedges has ruined any catching prospect in El Paso for me. Because guess what? If Ethan Salas goes to El Paso and he puts up a 130 WRC plus, I will not be singing his praises. I will be like, let's see that fucker get up here and do it. Because I just remember Austin Hedges. My guess with the catcher position is that they're going to try and bring back Elias Diaz. He seemed happy here. He'd be cheap. Probably a $1 to $2 million deal would be my guess. And if that doesn't work out, then I think that they're going to try and pull a David Peralta / Donovan Solano and sign a guy to a minor league deal and hope it works out.
Okay, let me quiz you
go
on
ahead.
something. Okay, so
Yeah.
Jurickson Profar in 2022 with the Padres, we knew him as like a low exit velocity guy who would kind of bloop his way on, but he didn't strike out a lot, and that was like his carrying quality, right? So his exit velocity in 2022 averaged out to 87.5. Now, Brett Sullivan last year in AAA, where pitches are, not as nasty because of the elevation, what would you say his average exit velocity was over 340 batted events in AAA?
What was Brett Sullivan's average exit velocity in AAA?
Yeah, if Profar's in 2022 was 87.5, so that, he's a relatively low EV guy until last year, what was Brett Sullivan's?
86.7.
85.2.
Oh no. This is Price is Right. I have gone over and I have lost.
In AAA, where you get, every pitch is not as nasty. He's hitting it, very lightly. And, he's making contact, which plays in AAA because, he's playing on the moon, so balls fly, but come on.
Yeah. I just want to read out the 7 available catchers right now, according to Spotrac. Again, one of the great mysteries in life. How do you actually pronounce this website's name? Spotrac. So right now, the available catchers are James McCann, Luke Miley, Yasmani Grandal, bring him home, Kurt Casale, Elias Diaz, Tucker Barnhart, and Martin Maldonado. Any of those names tickle your fancy, John?
No.
Yeah.
They do not.
No, they don't. They just straight up, they don't. Like, literally anyone who was interesting already signed. And they signed for really not that much money, frankly. So, I don't really know what to say. What I will say is Higashioka so far getting the most in terms of an average annual value of any catcher that signed so far this offseason was not on my bingo card. But the most being, $6.75 million average annual value.
Yeah.
And the Padres are like, nope, we're good. Kind of a bad sign.
I haven't been following baseball rumors quite as much as I normally do the past few days. Have you, I caught wind of Jose Trevino might be on the market thing? Was that a thing? Have you heard anything about that?
I heard that. It's interesting. I have a lot of trouble with this idea that the Yankees are such a specific team this offseason because they were cucked by Juan Soto. And they were not only cucked by Juan Soto, but the front office was openly broadcasting that they were willing to spend $50 million in average annual value on one dude. And the Yankees had other holes to fill. Like, it wasn't like they were going to, they could have signed Juan Soto, but they had other guys they needed to get, as evidenced by the moves that they have since made. They have, signed a pitcher. They didn't just go get an outfielder. They signed a pitcher, and they traded for a relief pitcher, and, they've done a bunch of other shit. And so, to me, I think the Yankees being like, oh, we're going to trade Jose Trevino because we don't want to pay him $3 million in ARB money. It just doesn't really seem like that's their flavor du jour. To me, it seems like, if they were trading Trevino, it wouldn't strictly be for a salary dump perspective, which is, I think that we're referencing the same tweet. And that was kind of the framework. They're like, he's due $3 million in arbitration. I'm like, fucking come on. If anyone, the Padres would be quibbling about that. You know what I mean? That's they're the ones that are up against it. Trevino, I know, is a framing god. Mm-hmm. So that thing obviously intrigues me. He had 10 framing runs last year, which is a win alone just in its framing runs. So what would something like Jose Trevino cost in trade value?
Great question. According to the best trade simulator of all time, Baseball Trade Values, he would be basically worth Luis Campusano. So we want to go catcher for catcher, like you said.
Look at that.
Luis Arias, Johnny Brito, Cash Mayfield, those guys. Or go catcher for catcher. If you want a ballsy move, who has the better eye for a catcher, and they would have an extra option here. But I mean,
can I also tell you that I
that?
actually think that I talked with one of my friends who's a diehard Yankees fan, and there's that old adage of like you never want to trade with the Tampa Bay Rays because they're gonna get you, like they got you. I think that's how Yankees fans feel about the Padres front office right now, like because of the Soto trade. Like I think that like I have a very small anecdotal sample size, but like the consensus that I feel like I've seen online and from my friends who are Yankees fans is that the Padres won the Soto trade. That like, which
they went to the World
I think
Series.
Objectively you could say yes, they did.
They went to the World Series. That's enough.
But they went to the World Series. No, 100%. Like they went to the World Series. Like I don't think you can be upset about that. Again, it's like if they had won the World Series, like there's no question. You know what I mean? Like so I think it's like very kind of traditional Yankees fan crying sort of mentality. Like I don't think how you can say like, oh, Juan Soto had an amazing playoffs, by the way, and carried us to the World Series, but we lost that trade. It's like, come on.
How many times we've been to the World Series? Twice. So fuck off, Yankees fans.
Yeah, but assuming Michael King stays healthy and we get anything from Randy Vasquez and Johnny Brito, like. That trade is not going to look so terrible in hindsight.
So then do you know, as a GM, how you reverse that kind of image? Roll it back, baby.
Oh.
Do another trade, and this time win it. And then what happens? Now we got a GM that's smarter than AJ Preller. Take it to the bank.
Oh, so that's what you think AJ's being like, Cashman, man, I'm trying to give you Luis Campusano. This is a guy who was projected to have a 60 overall raw power hit tool. Come on, man. Like
you have I offer you this trade. You have no thinking at all. Just go with it. Campusano for Trevino. What do you do?
I'm probably doing it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Because you have a guy that can play catcher versus a guy who might be able to play catcher.
Yeah.
And like that's the difference. And again, it's like we do have to be thinking and like we're really just trying to get through this year, like at the catcher position, because if Salas has a great 2025, he is in play for 2026. I do shudder to think if he's up here in 2025, things have gone very poorly. Like I don't think there's a way that he can like, even if he's crushing AA, like, are they really going to bring him up and start his clock?
Yeah, it's just not really a thing to bring up catchers that early.
Exactly.
I put some stat in the Discord at some point relatively recently where it was like the most home runs as a catcher before you turn 21, and the number was like 22 or something like that. You know how long it is until Ethan Salas is 21? So, like, I don't know. It would be unprecedented for him. Like, literally just no catcher has ever had a career anything like his for him to come up, even when he's 20, and be, a 10 home run guy. So, like, I don't know. Maybe. I find that hard to believe. I don't even know if I'd want to rush it. Just take your time. Let him bake. If you want to rush somebody, rush the shortstop. Rush DeVries, but don't rush Salas. He has so many obstacles between here and the major leagues. Like, he has to work up just his fatigue load, like how long he can catch the baseball over the course of a year, and then like when his bat starts to fall off over the course of the year, right? Because that is just something that's going to wear you down. And we're going to try to have him learn those things at the major league level? Nah. No thanks.
Yeah. Don't see it happening. Okay. Well, that's the catcher position. Now we do have some infielders to talk about. Really one infielder to talk about, and then kind of some other guys. And that is Eguy Rosario, who presents quite the interesting case for the Padres. I kind of think he's sort of like, you look at Eguy Rosario and you see what you want to see kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people in this fan base. I know, Christopher Reed on Padres Hot Tub is a Huge Eguy Rosario fan. And I think there are a lot of people who are like, he's a platoon bat who strikes out a ton. He's never going to play. Also, what position are you going to play him at? Where do you fall on the spectrum, John?
I don't know. I do think I'd lean towards the platoon, put his bat wherever you can, kind of guy. Like, best case, he's a Jed Jerko, but probably he's not going to reach that level of quality. I do have a question before I dive into the numbers, though, because I want to be on the inside of an inside joke. What is an E-guy?
What is an E? Oh.
It's like a thing that's on the Discord that, like, commonly they make fun of him as being an E-guy, but I don't know what it is. And I know it's like something that's happening in like high schools or something like that. It's vaguely. Do you remember what scene was? I don't even know how to describe scene, but I remember scene from. Did you not have scene kids in high school?
I don't think so.
Like there's goth emo and scene. No.
Okay, can you explain scene?
No, I can't. That's what I'm saying. It's like ineffable. It's like South Park had an episode that described the difference between goth and what did I just say? Not scene. Emo, yeah. And their explanation was emos are more likely to commit suicide and goths are more likely to be sad about the committing of a suicide. Like, but scene was like mostly to do with music, and they had, certain kinds of hair and like long or like really dark mascara, but I don't remember.
Sure.
But that was just a thing. Anyways, and I think that that's kind of similar to what an E-guy is in terms of like just something that people are doing that you vaguely describe, but
is it not like an
ecstasy younger than me.
guy? Is that what E-guy means? That it's someone who does ecstasy?
Maybe. I thought it was like
did we get old, John?
Online.
Is that what happened over the course of this podcast?
Right now. I thought for sure you would know. You're younger, man. You're supposed to know what an E-guy is.
I don't know anything, man. I really don't.
I can't even Google it. This is disgusting.
Yeah. Can I ask, is Eguy the short for something? Or is it just Eguy?
I'm pretty sure it's just Eguy.
It's just Eguy. And is Eguy a common name?
Have you ever heard it before? I've never heard it before.
I'm so intrigued. I mean, look, I've got a unique name, so I'm just
That's
curious.
True.
Like my name is mostly a weird pronunciation of a quite common name, and so Eguy is both unique in pronunciation and in spelling, which is, I think, like the thing that throws me for a loop with him. Do you think that the way that we are questioning Eguy, he questions right-handed pitching?
Yes, I do. That is such a flawless segue. Wow. You must have been at this for a while with you. So okay, yeah. What the hell is Eguy? So obviously at the major league level, he's crushed left-handed pitching, right? And in total, so far, he has a 231 WRC plus against left-handed pitchers. That has only been in 46 at-bats. Guess what? It's also been in 46 plate appearances, because while he has 5 home runs against left-handed pitching, he has literally never walked against a left-handed pitcher before. He has 5 home runs and no walks against left-handed pitchers. That's crazy. But against right-handed pitching so far, as a whole, he has a 14 WRC plus. And we say, okay, small sample size, whatever. But when you get more granular and you look at the minor league level, it's basically been, I mean, it hasn't been that dramatic, but it's been enough that you'd wonder whether he has any, value batting against right-handed pitchers at the major league level, because in 2024 in AAA, obviously it's on the moon, and in 107 either plate appearances or at-bats, I don't know because I didn't organize this well, but 107 something plate appearances or at-bats, he had an 809 OPS. Similarly, in 2023, he had a 746 OPS against right-handed pitchers. It's fine. It's not good. In 2022, it was a little bit better at 853, and in 2021, it was 755. Those were his OPSs against right-handed pitchers, which are all just like, he'd basically not be a prospect if he was only seeing right-handed pitchers. But against left-handed pitchers, the lowest he's ever had against left-handed pitchers was a 934 OPS, and that was in 2022. So that was the lowest. Everything else has been up around 1 dot. So he crushes left-handed pitching, and he always has. And he has shown that in the major league levels as well. So, if he's a left-handed or a guy who exclusively is batting against left-handed pitching, then probably he's a very, valuable prospect. The thing is, a middle infielder who is a short side of the platoon slash like depth option. How valuable is that? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that I would be very reticent to go in with him as like a starting second baseman where you're putting him against like all right-handed pitchers because he has shown, even at the minor league levels, that he's not ready for that.
Yeah, and also, I think one of the things that's the most interesting about Eguy, this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but like Eguy, like legit might have one of, if not the best arms in the organization, like as a position player. Like this is a guy who, like, you know, as a third baseman was quite exceptional. I think, John, you pulled the data that he had 2 outs above average in just 111 innings, which I think
incredible.
would prorate out to something like 12 to 15 over a full season, which would make him like one of the best like third baseman in the game.
It's obviously small sample size.
Yeah.
But still, it's still like it wouldn't be lower than 2, it'd at least be above that probably, and that's already good. So yeah, he'd be a really good third baseman.
And you'd say, hey, I've got an above average third baseman defensively who mashes lefties. I'm like, I'm interested. Tell me more, theoretically, we also have that in Manny Machado. He just does some other things, which is putting it a little bit, selling Manny a little bit short. Yeah. The thing about Eguy is that the exact team who would know how to use this guy and use him well is the Dodgers. Like,
Ooh.
Could have
went with Rays. What the hell?
No, I don't mean like that means like we should trade him to the Dodgers. I'm just saying more as like we constantly talk about like what are ways that we can be a better organization? What are things that teams like the Dodgers are doing that we're not doing? And it's like we don't really develop guys who are like you're saying, like a short side platoon depth piece. Yeah. And because like the thing about, you might say like, oh, like, Eguy is not a all-around player in the way that certainly Jackson Merrill or Tatis or any of these other guys who have come through our organization are. And so therefore, like, he's not like really that good of a prospect or anything like that. But it's like, again, what makes Eguy valuable is that he's cheap and that like having him on the team doesn't cost you a lot of money. And so if you can figure out a way to use him effectively, like the Dodgers just paid $17 million for Michael Conforto. And that was like baffling to me. But you know what? The Dodgers are going to ask Michael Conforto to do the one thing he does well, and that's it. Like, they're just going to use him as a platoon piece, and they're going to figure out the rest. And, like, the Padres have this guy in this organization who does one thing really well, and it's pretty clear, like, based off of, like, the data that you have in the minor leagues and in the small amount in the majors, that he does that thing pretty well. So the question is, are you going to give him the chance to do that? Are you going to deploy him in that way, or are you not? Because if not, you should probably trade him because he is valuable to a team like the Dodgers or like the Rays or like any other team who's like, you know what? I know exactly how I'm going to use that guy. And if AJ's smart about it, which I have to say, I trust AJ after 2024. I really feel strongly that like he's garnered a lot more in my mind. He will know if he's peddling Eguy out there, like, hey, look, I might not be able to use this guy in the way I want to use him, but you can, and I know that's valuable to you, so you better give me something valuable in return. This is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but like, what do you think of Eguy Rosario in left field?
He's had honestly, I would definitely be down for, developing. I'm positive he would be at least okay out there after enough reps. And, if you have him as a left field slash, second baseman, DH, whatever, against left-handed pitchers only, if that's his utility role, then yes. If you're peddling a guy who can only hit like barely 800 in terms of his OPS in AAA against right-handed pitchers into left field, traditionally, hitter position, then that's not going to work, right? And so the question is, do we have enough depth to allow Eguy to be a bench guy who rotates in? And we have never had enough depth to do platoons. When I can't even think of a platoon that we've ever used, like, in the last like 5 years. Like, can you think of one? I can't even think of one. And so, like, maybe you can argue Grisham and Azekar kind of was a platoon a little bit, like towards the end of 2022. But like it's because we never have depth, and so like you literally have to use him. You have to have enough players on your team to roster Eguy, but only use him when in those situations in which he's valuable. And are we going to be able to do that, or is it going to be him versus Tyler Wade for a position? Like, is that going to be a platoon? Because fuck, I don't want that, right? And so I don't know. So if that is exactly what we're doing, and we can finally manage to pull off a platoon, and maybe he gets 100 at bats in left field and another 100 at bats at second base or first base with like 50 to 100 against right-handed pitching, when we just like need rest or when somebody's injured. Great. That's an incredibly valuable use of his skills, and I bet that his WAR would be exciting. It'd be like he put up 2 WAR and only 250 plate appearances. Wow, like what a valuable guy. And then, you could sell him to a fan base, but I don't know that we would do that. And so if we can't do that, then yeah, trade him.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we have undersold just how much Eguy Rosario strikes out. Like,
yeah, that's true.
When you think about like Tatis when he first came up and in 2019, and people were like, okay, this kid's good. He can hit the ball. He's fast, blah, 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 but he strikes out a lot. He was striking out at a 29.6% clip in 2019. And Eguy Rosario is, what, a 34% strikeout rate? Something like that. So, and he's not Fernando Tatis Jr. So,
what's crazy too is that, like, at least at the major league level, he also walks at, like, his career walk rate has been 4. So, like, that means that he's swinging away and still striking out that much, Normally, you at least are, like, Trent Grishaming, where you're striking out a lot in exchange for also getting walks. But at least at the major league level, so far, small sample size, but so far, it's like, whoa, how are we going to fix that?
Yeah. So, look, all of that's to say, I think Eguy is a really interesting dude, and I actually don't think that he's going to be playing infield at all for the Padres.
Really?
I think if he's... Yeah, I don't. I mean, like, because, again, he's someone who, I don't really think you're going to keep him on your bench as your, that's what you have Tyler Wade for, is to play infield in emergency situations. So unless you can't really afford to have like a platoon for your infield bench of like, we'll put in like Eguy against lefties and Tyler Wade against righties. You can't really I guess you could DH him against lefties ? But yeah, again, is that a valuable use? Yeah, like to me, I feel like the way this offseason is shaping up, there is a non-zero chance that he ends up in the conversation for left field in some sort of platoon situation if they can figure that out. Which if they can sign like a cheap lefty bat who's a real major leaguer to play left field and who hits again, who mashes righties but can't hit lefties at all, like, and then they pair him with Eguy Rosario, I'm actually okay with that. But I don't think that they're going to do that. So
yeah, I do like that you're asking for a real major leaguer. Wow, you're going really out on a limb there with that.
I know.
Real
asking
major leaguer.
Tyler Wade / Mason McCoy, mostly who cares, John?
Yeah, mostly who cares. I mean, they're both depth, and I mean, we know what Tyler Wade is. What is he? He's a guy that has grit, right? And that's my synopsis of Tyler Wade. He has grit.
Well, finally, let's talk about the outfielders. We have 3 guys we want to discuss. Really 2.5. So let's just say their names out loud first, and then we'll go into them in order. Brandon Lockridge, Tirso Ornelas, and Oscar Gonzalez. Let's start with Brandon Lockridge. John, who is Brandon Lockridge, except for someone who absolutely hammers zins into his lips in the back of locker room interviews post game? That was one of my favorite clips from last year. Anyway, Brandon Lockridge.
He is our newest, or one of our newest Padres, right? He is an outfielder. He's 27 years old. He was kind of our 5th outfielder at the end of last year, and that's probably the role that he would be looking for going forward. He is a speedy guy. I think he had like 30 plus stolen bases with very few caught stealings last year in the minor leagues. And he plays good defense, and he can play all three outfield positions. So, he's a version of Sugar, hopefully a better version of Sugar. He does have an interesting profile that has changed relatively recently. Like before 2023, before he got into AAA, he has always, as a skill, been able to hit the ball hard, right? He hits the ball hard, well, relatively hard, not crazy hard. He hits the ball relatively hard. And he also strikes out a lot, well, a decent amount. And when he was striking out at the minor league level at like a nearly 30% rate, and only hitting at max, I think his biggest year was 14 home runs. 14 home runs was the most that he ever had in a single year. So you're striking out like at Tatis levels, but only hitting 14 home runs. Maybe that's not going to work out. And so he kind of changed his approach, it seems like, once he got to AAA, or at least in 2023. And then he became like a, less than 5 home run guy, but got his K rate down into kind of major league average, actually worse than major league average, even though it was at the minor league level, numbers with good EVs. Like he had his exit velocities, even in the minor leagues, were 90 plus, which is good. But in exchange for those little strikeouts that he traded off for, he basically never hit the ball in the air. So he's a guy with speed who's trying to hit the ball hard on the ground or line drives and take advantage of his speed. It made sense. It's probably the only way that he would make it to the majors, because if he's swinging for the fences constantly in the major league levels and striking out 30% of the time, when he doesn't have very much ceiling as a home run hitter, and he's probably just not going to be a major league player. And so he at least tried to be it seemed like he almost tried to be a fifth outfielder, where he's a guy that I could put the ball in play at least at a major league average level, and maybe it'll go somewhere, and maybe I'll steal a base, and I can be a great defensive replacement, and I can pinch run for you and steal bases. That's what he went for, and that's probably what he's going to be.
Yeah. I think it's worth just drilling in on what John's talking about in terms of what Brandon Lockridge is aiming to accomplish in terms of his BABIP. In 2021 with the Yankees in Double-A, he had a 439 BABIP against 191 plate appearances. 2023 Double-A, he had a 373. 2023 Triple-A, he had a 397. And then across Triple-A with the Padres and Yankees, he had a 418 BABIP and a 413 BABIP, respectively. This is a guy who is praying that he puts the ball in play and then literally being so fast that he can beat you out. Like truly, I've never seen someone across, what is that, 400 plate appearances in AAA hit not just barely over 400, but almost 420 BABIP levels, across an entire season, is really, really quite remarkable. Part of the reason why both Fangraphs Depth Chart and Steamer predict him to have a 320 BABIP in the major leagues, which is not nothing. League average tends to hover around 300. So this is a guy who they think if he puts the ball in play, he's got a decent shot of getting on base. Look, I mean, I think the biggest thing about Brandon Lockridge is that he's got 3 option years. So I mean, I put in our document, I really hope he's signed up for Southwest frequent flyer miles program, because he's going to be flying between El Paso and San Diego a lot. Which is fine. It's I would be stoked if Brandon Lockridge is able to unlock something in terms of his launch angle, stop striking out just quite as much as he does. Also, it's worth saying, this is a guy who, I think stole 50 bases last year in the minors. 48. He stole 48. Yeah, he has truly 40 stolen base plus potential if you got enough playing time. I just don't think he's going to get enough playing time. I think Brandon Lockridge, being who he is and him being in the organization, is fantastic, because it means Jose Azocar is not that guy anymore. Yeah. And I also, to go back to the point I was making earlier about the Padres not being good trade partners with the Yankees from the Yankees perspective. Going back the other way in the Brandon Lockridge trade was Enyel De Los Santos.
Ooh,
So that
got him. Got him.
really it was AJ saying, Cash, listen, man, I can't figure out this Enyel De Los Santos. I know Matt Blake can figure him out. It's going to cost you nothing. You just got to throw in this Lockridge kid who's just, sweltering away for you guys in AAA. And
you already got Trent Grisham, so you don't need this guy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Brandon Lockridge being a fifth outfielder for this team is great. And if the team does not ask him to do anything more than that, then that's awesome. And I wish Brandon Lockridge nothing but the best. If he has to do anything more than that, I'm worried.
Yeah. I mean, he's 28, and I would be so surprised if we found some way to unlock him. Like, when he was hitting the ball in the air, he was striking out a lot. Then, as soon as he stopped hitting the ball in the air, he struck out still a decent amount for the minor leagues. But, like, what you have nothing to trade, basically. There's no, like, clay that you can use to mold something better. It's just, like, he's going to hit the ball hard on the ground or as line drives and run fast. And that's, and provide good defense as a 28-year-old. That's fine. Yeah. That's what he is.
Yeah. So maybe we could talk about a guy who is probably the exact opposite of Tirso or of Brandon Lockridge in some ways, which is Tirso Ornelas, a guy who's been in the Padres organization for, it feels like, since the Padres played at Qualcomm Stadium.
I think we traded Klesko for him. I don't know. It's been a long time.
It's been quite a long time. If you're not familiar, Tirso Ornelas is from Tijuana. So, one of those guys who, I feel like that the fan base, people who are in the know, have always been kind of rooting for him to pan out because it would just be such a cool story to have, a kid from TJ come and succeed on the Padres. This is this write-up that you have in here from Fangraphs?
Tis.
It's from Longenhagen, I'm assuming.
I think. I believe so. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is.
So I just think it's worth reading the first paragraph in here, which is the left-handed slugger exhibits promising raw power. He had a 114 mile per hour max exit velo for El Paso. Only the rehabbing Fernando Tatis Jr. posted an exit velocity higher than that for the Chihuahuas in 2023, and his 104.3 90th percentile exit velo was fifth best on the club. That improving strength led to the heightened homer total, but Ornelas, who begins from an open stance before starting his swing with a leg kick, still hits the ball on the ground too much to project for a better than average in-game pop. While Ornelas has kept his strikeouts in check in recent years, he might struggle against better breaking stuff after both chasing and whiffing on sliders at the upper levels. I think that provides a pretty good encapsulation of who Tirso is. When we talked about who Eguy Rosario is for the Padres, a righty bat who mashes lefties and strikes out a lot. Tirso Ornelas is a lefty bat who doesn't strike out a lot and theoretically can hit righties quite hard. I'm not saying that that's what I think the Padres are going to do in terms of a platoon split, but in some ways they do complement each other. I'm curious, John, do you think that Tirso Ornelas has a future in the major leagues with the Padres?
I don't know. I feel like I have like prospect fatigue with him just because it's been so long where we've heard his name, and he's 24, right? 24-year-olds improve all the time. That's not like, that wouldn't be a crazy thing for him to still be developing as a player. That's not wild. That being said, what he is right now is not something that I'm super excited about. He has, like it says, his 90th, or his EV90s, it was 104.3, which is very good. So he hits the ball hard. Unfortunately, hits the ball on the ground too often. He pulls basically everything. He has a low K rate. He also has a, only okay walk rate. And so he'd go to the major league level and probably walk at a major league average rate, probably strike out at about a major league average rate, probably hit the ball a little bit harder than average, but also not hit the ball, in the air quite enough to have like a lot of home run pop, which would make him probably about a major league average bat. However, if you're saying that this guy who's only 24 has, been slowly progressing, which it seems like he has been able to slowly get the ball into the air. His launch angles are improving slowly over time. Like they were 6.8 launch angle in AAA in 2023 and moved up to 8.7 in AAA last year. That's a small improvement, right? And that it did end up leading to more homers. So like that's something. And maybe he's just slowly making his way up. And maybe if he spent another year down there, then suddenly he is a guy that is hitting the ball in the air and also hitting the ball hard, and then is a good player. I think I put in the document that I think that if things work out perfectly, like if Tirso Ornelas hits his 80th, 90th percentile outcome, he's basically a left-handed hitting outfield version of Ty France, wherein his bat is good enough to stick around, but you don't know exactly where to play him because his defense isn't very good. So you'd be playing him, in left field when you can, probably using a defensive replacement, probably having him at DH once in a while. Unfortunately, he doesn't have huge platoon splits, kind of like Ty France didn't have like huge platoon splits. So you wouldn't just always take him out against left-handed pitching. You'd probably just take him out late in the game when you're winning, or put him in late in the game when you're losing. And so there's just enough there. 24 years old, hits the ball hard. Doesn't have a good enough launch angle. But, he doesn't strike out a lot, so you could sacrifice him, getting a little bit more launch angle in order to, trade a little bit of strikeout for a little bit more balls in the air. And maybe he's like a, 20-plus home run guy, a little bit above average with a little bit below average defense. And, that's a valuable guy.
Yeah. When I look at his AAA slash line last year, he hit 297, 367, 497. So a 376 WOBA, but again, it being El Paso, it is only good for a 113 WRC plus. So just doing a little bit better than Brett Sullivan does down in El Paso.
But with better peripherals, like better EVs.
Oh, I'm just
way better. Max
I'm just giving you shit.
EVs.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the silliness of that place. But yeah, I mean, look, if you could tell me that we could have a lefty Ty France playing in left field for us, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I would do it in a heartbeat because, again, Tirso Ornelas is cheap, and that's what matters right now. And if you had Ty France in there and you held everything else, even, again, Petco Park is a good left field for someone who doesn't really know how to play left field. We were able to mask Juan Soto in there for some time. And so I think that more than there is like a Dr. Frankenstein thing where you're looking at Eguy and Tirso and you're like, if I just had some lightning and some magic, I could turn this into something of a platoon. I just don't really know that either of these guys are ever going to be able to stick full time in the major leagues in left field.
And I said that's 80th or 90th percentile outcome is the Ty France. So my question is, if I gave you a die to roll and I said, if you roll this die and it's either a 1 or a 2, he's Ty France. Are you willing to give him playing time at the major league level in order to find out, whether you roll that 1 or a 2 afterwards? You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I hear you. But I guess my question is, if you're not playing Tirso / Eguy or one of these guys in left field, are you signing David Peralta? Is that my other choice?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
I mean, I don't know, man.
The trade is probably the most likely outcome, but if we're just talking about that trade off, so rolling the die versus having David Peralta, which is a little bit more of a consistent, outcome.
The thing about David Peralta, dude, is he's going to be 38 next year, I think. At some point, Father Time is undefeated. And, David Peralta had some really solid stretches last year. He also struggled, especially at the beginning. And, he got the train going eventually last year, but there's no guarantee that he gets the train going again. I really feel like if the Padres don't make a trade, that they're going to wait and see in spring training and see how these guys are doing and then sign a minor league deal. with some free agent who falls through the cracks. Because unfortunately, like, that's the monopoly money that we're playing with right now. Like,
I have a weird, just like, do you have this same thing that I have, which is like this weird thought process in the back of my mind where something like David Peralta hits, David Peralta, Higgy kind of too, similar vein, but his was kind of more likely. But when they hit, and then you have a chance to keep them or not keep them again, the answer is usually don't. Like we played with lightning and we won, and then like let's quit now. We are ahead at the dealer's table, right? And then you're like, David Peralta worked out for us. I feel like if we sign David Peralta again, it won't work out. I don't know why, but that's like just how I think from a baseball perspective. Like, we struck lightning in a bottle once, let's not try to do it twice.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to our final guy, Oscar Gonzalez. John, you wrote mostly who cares.
Mostly who cares, yeah. He has a little bit more sexiness to him in that he is a little bit more sexy than Tirso. No, I'm just kidding. But he had, the home runs at the major league level, and had at one point 123 WRC plus and 382 at bats at the major league level as a 24-year-old for Cleveland. So, there's some kind of grasping onto the past and hoping that it comes, to fruition again towards Oscar Gonzalez. But when you break it down his profile, he's terrible at defense, so hopefully his bat plays, right? But he's also like my least favorite guy, which is a never walks guy. So he's just swinging as hard as he can, swinging at everything, has basically no approach at the plate. His zone contact rate is not very good. It's been in like the low 80s. So that means that he's chasing at nearly a 50% rate. He doesn't make great contact on balls over the plate. It's basically like you have to make a mistake and he'll smack a homer every once in a while. Kind of like that 3-and-D kind of. His profile would be great for a catcher. He would be a great 3-and-D catcher. But if you're giving him left field or DH at bats, and he's not even playing the defense well, and there's pitchers out there that know that he chases at a 50% rate, which is terrible, just like god awful. That means you could basically just throw every pitch outside the strike zone every single time, and he'd probably strike out on a 3-2 count, right? On statistically. So you can't do that. And so I understand why we got him. He has the Franmil upside, kind of, where he's not walking a lot, but he's hitting balls hard. But I think that only works for a few weeks, and so I understand storing him in the minor leagues. I think he has another option year. Does he have? No, I would have wrote that down, but I don't. Either way, if he has an option year, then maybe you keep him around in the minor leagues for, backup in case you need him for a few weeks. But if he's playing for even more than a few weeks, if he's doing, the David Peralta role of last year, I think that it would not work for a very long time because pitchers know exactly what his weakness is now, and he hasn't changed it.
Yeah. I mean, like, literally, the comparison with Tirso, I think, is spot on, because also this was a guy who signed in the Guardians organization back in 2015 and then made his debut in 2022. And his 2022 went real well with the Guardians. He put up a 123 WRC plus across 382 plate appearances, put up 1.4 FWAR. And then in 2023, he did something that I have never seen before, which is that he put up literally exactly the negative amount of FWAR that completely wiped away his 2022 gain. So he was worth 1.4 FWAR in 2022, and he was worth negative 1.4 FWAR in 2023, in which he played 180 plate appearances and put up a 48 WRC plus. Trent Grisham just blushed. Before the Guardians ultimately had enough and sent him down. And then he ended up playing in the Yankees organization and just never cracking the big leagues again with them in 2024. So I think that's exactly kind of, Oscar's story is almost a cautionary tale of Tirso, which is like, these guys work out until they don't. And then it's like, oh, okay. And then, what are they really worth? So, yeah, I mean, I'm just curious as we kind of put a button on this episode, like, of the Bubble Boys whomst we have discussed tonight. You had the word cromulent on here, which I had to look up.
What?
I did not know the word cromulent.
Dude, Deed from the Discord has been like using that for literally years. Years he's been saying cromulent. And so I've picked that up as part of my vernacular. Simpsons,
It's a good
baby.
vocab word. Good SAT word, as people used to say. Do they still do that in the SAT? I feel like the SAT's changed a lot.
What am I, 18? Why would I know?
I don't know. We've already determined that we're no longer.
What's an EGI? So you tell me what an EGI is, and I'll tell you about the SATs.
Which of the Bubble Boys is going to stick on the roster? Who do you think? Campy?
Stick on our major league level, or
yes,
stick
yes.
at
Who is going to be on the Padres roster in 2025?
I would say very likely Campy, so definitely I put my money down on Campy. Eguy has options. Are we talking about at all in major leagues or like on opening day?
I want to say on opening day. Who's going to be on the Padres opening day roster?
Eguy's a hard one. I'm going to say that yes, he is on the major league roster, but that is actually a pessimistic view, I feel like, because if he's on the major league roster, it's because we haven't fully filled out the major league depth chart. Brandon Lockridge, I think, also will be on because I think the easiest thing to sign or trade for from a left-handed or for a left fielder will be a bat first guy, and that would make Lockridge a defensive replacement. So I also think that he would make it. Tirso no.
Tirso no. I mean, look. Bryce Johnson had 73 plate appearances for the Padres last year. Jose Zocar had 79 plate appearances for the Padres. Lest we forget that Graham Pauley had 32 plate appearances for the Padres last year.
Opening day,
you know, crazier things have happened.
Sure.
And I tend to agree with your assessment. I think that Campy is for sure on the opening day roster. I don't see a world where we trade Campy and we're not on the losing side of that trade. Like,
Jose Trevino.
I just don't see it possible. I don't think Brian Cashman's on the Fucky Fuck website using baseball trade values.
I'll tell him about it. I'll teach him.
You know what? Actually, the way some people talk about Brian Cashman, he might be. Who's to say? I think if the Yankees are trading for Campy, like, I feel like the Yankees figure out Campy, and then we are looking like big old dopes. And so, also, can you imagine Campy with like no long hair and no beard?
Ooh,
crazy.
I don't want to think about it.
I know, crazy. So I do think that Eguy is going to be on the opening day roster because I do have a slightly pessimistic view of how things stand right now. And like, look, if he's on the opening day roster, it probably means that they made a trade for an outfielder. In which case, okay, that's great, but what is the hole that we now have to plug because we've traded away? Is it Dylan Cease? Okay, now we need another starting pitcher, or that means that one of our other Bubble Boys, Johnny Brito or Randy Vasquez, is now on the opening day roster. So you know what I mean? It's
that's
like,
totals all the way down.
It really is pulling at the thread and of this Jenga tower, which is two metaphors which I've mixed, which means that it's time to go home. Any final thoughts on our on these Bubble Boys or any Bubble Boys as we are ending our Bubble Boys series?
No, AJ, your goal is to make all of these players obsolete. If you make all of them obsolete, wow, what an offseason you've had.
Yeah. If you make all of these players obsolete, I will say, wow, what is the blackmail that you have on Eric Katsenda? You, sir, have done a good job. Well, John, let me also just say Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. 2024, obviously. We had some fits and starts with par, but I'm hoping 2025 we'll be able to bring you guys some more episodes. But we appreciate you. We appreciate you listening to the show. Appreciate the kind words that folks said. I was recently at the Padres Hot Tub Trivia night that Monty hosted down at Stone Brewing in Little Italy, and a lot of people came up and talked about par, and
nice.
said that they enjoyed listening to the show. So I really, really appreciate it. So this has been another edition of Pods Above Replacement. Happy New Year, everyone. Here's to a better 2025. John Precoda and Raphie Cantor saying, see you next time.